And yep, nothing too unusual. It looks a lot like the last deck we featured actually previously this round.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yep.
Got Temporal Spring in it. But other than that, on the other hand, we have David Kring playing Sneak and Show.
Oh, cool. This deck's always fun to see in action. Turn 1 Emrakul, turn 3 Emrakul.
Yeah, it can do some crazy stuff. For those who know how Sneak and Show work, it's got 4 Progenitus, 4 Emrakul, alongside Sneak Attack, Show and Tell, Intuition, all kinds of ways to get those cards out.
So its aim is basically just to cheat a very powerful creature onto the battlefield very early.
Yeah, and it can certainly do that.
Can't Temporal Spring Emrakul. That's for sure.
You cannot, or Progenitus for that
Or
matter.
Progenitus. I imagine the Temporal Spring is not in his deck for this game.
I would also imagine that. Interesting card. I wonder why it's in there. Maybe he just loves the card.
Probably.
I've definitely seen players in Legacy just be like, I love this card. I'm going to play with this card.
Yeah.
It's not good, but I'm going to play it.
One of. You can put it back with your Brainstorms.
And ship it with your Force of Will. Right?
Exactly.
So the game's developed. Currently have Volcanic Island and Normal Island, plus Lotus Petal for David Kring. He just cracked a Brainstorm. David Thomas with just his Tropical Island on the battlefield.
Is this a main phase Brainstorm we have here?
I believe so.
Oh, interesting choice. AJ would probably criticize this main phase Brainstorm, but we'll see what David does with it. Might be he's going to explode here. One important thing to notice is that this is Game 3, so the players have a lot of knowledge of each other's decks.
And they've all sideboarded too.
Exactly. So David Kring probably knows about Stifles and Dazes and Spell Snares, so expect him to play a little more cautiously this game, especially when he's not under any pressure.
Ponder from David Thomas, followed by a responsive Brainstorm by David Kring.
Interesting.
And this is definitely a Brainstorm AJ would criticize. He talks about you don't have a shuffle effect, and it's just a ponder.
Right.
There's not even any mental misstep left to counter it.
Exactly. Basically, this Brainstorm is going to be draw 2, put 1 back.
Yep.
In essence. David Thomas keeps his cards off Ponder, drawing a Force of Will. Probably one of his best cards against David. In the David mirror.
Yeah. Thomas versus Kring, to be
Yep.
precise. David plays a Misty Rainforest, cracks Lotus Petal. Is this it? Show and Tell. David's like,
I will respond.
I think I see a Spell Pierce, a Daze, and a Force Will in his hand. So David Thomas is loaded up on Disruption.
Yeah, very well set up to fight this first Show and Tell from David Kring. I'm sure Kring suspects that this Show and Tell won't resolve. So he's sort of testing the waters here, shot across the bow.
It's like, well, maybe.
You never know.
Gotta get rid of that counter magic somehow.
Yep. So looking at the sideboards, David Thomas, in his deck, we did see the Spell Pierce. He probably has Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast as well. Maybe Crozen Grip, depending on how he wants to fight the sneak attacks, though probably not.
Probably not.
Maybe Surgical Extraction as well.
I doubt it.
Yeah, probably not again.
Yeah.
And then for Kring,
There's a Spell Pierce on the Show and
Yeah,
Tell
spell-
for David Thomas.
Kring not going to have much to sideboard here. Maybe Divert as his only sideboard card.
Yeah, not a lot of options. Misdirection from David Kring. Pitching something I couldn't quite see, but attempts to misdirect the Spell Pierce, and that all resolves. He's like, Show and Tell still on the stack,
Yep.
though I have more responses. Force of Will,
yeah.
pitching Snapcaster
Ooh.
Mage.
Leaving himself with Ponder, Daze, and a third blue card.
All right, and that resolves. So Show and Tell in the graveyard. David Thomas gets to untap.
Yep. Uses both players' resources there.
Looks like he's gripping Ponder, Daze, Snapcaster Mage.
And that Snapcaster is really powerful because of that Spell Pierce in his graveyard.
And David Kring just draws and passes back. David Thomas ripping a Brainstorm there, which he'll wait on. David Kring, though, goes for his Brainstorm right now, casting it with a Misty Rainforest on the battlefield. Picks up 3 new cards, will have to put 2 of them back, but has the opportunity to shuffle afterward.
Definitely the most important part of Brainstorm. He wants to put those 2 useless cards back in there. But he untaps and draws, so they must have been good ones.
Ah, interesting. Untap and draw. All right, ships back to David Thomas, who draws a Force of Will,
Wow.
continuing his cavalcade of counterspells.
Interesting Brainstorm here. What do you think about it?
Don't like it. I don't see any reason to pull the trigger now. He's digging for lands, I understand, but I'd rather just be patient. You have such a good grip right now, you don't need to blow that Brainstorm.
Right, and as we can see here, he did not draw any lands, so he's going to be stuck drawing whichever 2 cards he puts back for the next 2 turns, unless he chooses to shuffle with Ponder.
That's kind of the problem with brainstorming when you're looking for lands, is you're just stuck on it if you don't.
Right.
I'd rather wait till I really, really need that land. And now he doesn't have a 3-up for Snapcaster Mage too, which is very relevant. You can no longer Mage Spell Pierce. David Kring cracks a fetch land, and David Thomas stifles it, though.
That's probably a very brutal stifle. David Kring clearly did not want that top card. He has no choice, and immediately ships back.
David Thomas draws his card. Probably not going to do a whole lot. Yep, just ships.
If I was David Thomas, I think I might have played a Tarmogoyf that's on top of his deck there. Obviously putting it back differently from Brainstorm.
Would you have played the Ponder?
Well, without Tarmogoyf, no, but...
I probably would have kept the Tarmogoyf on top and then played the Ponder, shuffle away the other card.
Sure, yeah.
Looks like he's going to go for Ponder here. Nope, maybe not. Rearranging his mana into different directions, all over the place. All wibbly wobbly. And here is Tarmogoyf.
Hits the battlefield. Finally, he has a clock.
Alright, so now he is... This is where things get really interesting. So David Thomas now has pressure, and he's got Disruption in his hand. So now David Kring is one on the back foot. He can no longer just wait around to assemble his combo. He only has a matter of turns, and David has to fight through David Thomas's suite of counter magic.
Yeah, and he has 2 Force of Wills in his hand, in addition to Snapcaster. So this is going to be very tough for David Kring.
Goyf is a 4-5. Will crash David Kring down to 14 life here. David Thomas in a pretty good position.
And David Kring just continues to assemble the perfect grip to try and bust through Thomas's wall of counter magic. And this is interesting. He's thinking about Snapcaster Mage.
I don't like that. I mean, it might change his clock a little bit, but I think all you have to do is make sure David Kring can't kill you. And I'd rather have the extra counter spell in that turn.
Exactly.
Unless you think you're not going to have the mana to cast it, in which case you'd go for it. If he has 2 Snapcasters, which I can't quite tell. Delver of Secrets, okay. Delver of Secrets down for David Thomas.
So David Kring, not at 18, he is at 10 life right now.
And cast Intuition.
And if you're David Thomas, do you daze this?
I think I would. I mean, he only has... what better target you can have for days, right?
Right, I definitely would, especially since he has that tap land. That tap land's not going to produce mana this turn.
Yep. And I mean, yeah, you could say, oh, wait for the show and tell, but I think David Kring will probably wait until he has a 4th land for the show and tell.
Right.
Or, some way to play around it, or be willing to blow counter magic. For the cost of a daze, you get a lot of value out of that Intuition.
Right, David Thomas's only worry might be that Kring might be trying to bait out a counterspell here.
All right, well, David Thomas lets David Kring resolve.
And see, this is the problem with not countering the Intuition, because now he gets lands, and those are certainly uncounterable.
Yeah, it's like the old trick where they'd be like, oh, whatever, I don't need to counter the tutor, then you go get Dust Bowl and just crush them.
Exactly.
Same kind of deal here. Those are Ancient Tombs, tap for 2 mana. David takes 2 damage when he does it, but if it's on the turn he wins, not going to matter a whole lot.
Right.
And this will propel him up to 5 mana on his next turn.
And interesting to note, even if David Kring does tap that for mana, he'll drop to 8 life, and that'll still just be 1 point short for David Thomas, if we have the life totals correct here.
Alright, David Kring draws his card. There's an Ancient Tomb.
And this will probably be sneak attack here.
Taps 4, leaving up Volcanic Island, and there's a sneaky attack. Although David Thomas might have seen this one coming, might not be so sneaky.
Perhaps not.
David Thomas cracks his Misty Rainforest, going into his deck for another land.
So we'll likely see him playing Snapcaster Mage and flashing back his Spell Pierce right now. And in fact, that will give him lethal on the swing back if he can find an instant on the top of his deck. Which at this point is pretty likely. His deck is mostly instants.
Yeah, it's pretty easy for David Thomas. How sick would it be if he reveals the Temporal Spring, just in case? I'm sure he boarded it out, right?
Yeah.
There's no way it's still in his deck.
I would hope so.
One more person.
Alright, Snapcaster Mage for David Thomas.
And we need one more person.
And David Kring knows that that's bad news, needs to Force of Will that.
Yeah, Force of Will's the Snapcaster because he doesn't want the body around.
Right.
Which is pretty relevant.
But that Force of Will should do it.
Force of Will back from David Thomas.
Even if it doesn't, there's one more waiting in the wings.
David Kring forcing again. David Thomas with both Daze and Force of Will in his hand.
He could probably use either one here, but chooses the Force of Will. And David Thomas only with 2 cards left, not enough to force and put Nemrical into play.
Oh, David Kring has Force left, but no cards left in his hand.
And that does it. David Thomas wins the battle of Combo versus Rug.
Yeah, crazy stuff. That was a crazy last turn.
Yeah, he just had 1 extra counterspell.
Yep. And David Thomas, that's what means probably